Well, I can't leave this morning on a down note with the pen that I just found that was broken. I have to end on a happy note before I start my day. And I know I've said the following things in other videos, but maybe not all together, all at the same time. And I just thought I would share with you why I like a certain kind of 51 more than other kinds of 51s. But let me tell you why I like 51s in the first place. The 51, it took me a long while to like them because they didn't have the ability to make a nice calligraphic line. And I thought they were kind of ugly on top of it. They just were too modern for my taste. I wanted something that had fancy gold bands and a nice flexible nib and a flashy clip and fun plastics and whatever in my early years of collecting. And it wasn't until I had many customers that wanted the 51, and I couldn't understand why. Every time I got a bunch, especially the aerometric ones, I would sell them wholesale to a guy and sold pens in his store in Boston. So I was just happy to get rid of them. And I kick myself now thinking about it because 51s are great. And this realization came to me late in my, relatively late in my collecting old pens. I remember once seeing a box of a dozen gray 51s with sterling silver caps at an antique shop in Wisconsin for, I don't know, $2 each or something, and I bought one of them. Oh dear. Anyway, regrets. Because I didn't like 51s. I didn't like them here or there. I didn't like them anywhere. I didn't like them in a box. I didn't like them with a fox. I didn't like them. And then suddenly I did. All of the planets converged at exactly the right way, and Orca is going to join me now. Orca, you can't be here. Okay, go, Orca. For God's sake. Orca, you have to go. I know. I suddenly understood why they are as magnificent as they are. And one of the many reasons that they are as great as they are is the fact that they have a nib that makes a line that Euclid would love. The line it makes is unvaried. It has length, no dimension. I mean, yes, this does have dimension, but Euclid, mathematicians say lines do not have a width. And these pens make a line that doesn't draw attention to the width because it doesn't vary. It's Johnny one note. And it comes from a point, this line, which doesn't have to be straight, but I'm drawing it straight. It wants me to draw a straight line, this pen. Has a point that looks like a point. It doesn't look like a nib. It looks like a point, a little tiny point at the end of a very simple looking pen makes a simple looking line, and there's something that's just so satisfying about that invention. I used to say that, and I still do say, that George Parker invented the duofold, but God invented the 51, just because it has a perfection in its design. Okay, now that you know that, let's talk about the kind of nib I like these to have. even though I just told you the perfect quality of this pen is that it makes a line with no variation. I do like variation to happen on some of these pens, and I can find some. Every once in a while I find some that will actually have a little tiny bit of flex to them because of just the way they are. But let me just show you some other ones first, and then I'll explain why. I'll show you the ones that I like kind of the best. Just trying to find which one is which, because they all look alike. This one I bought because I had a job to do, a particular job, and I had to write with big, broad, sloppy, to my mind, lettering that sort of looked like architecture lettering. You know how architects write. I can't do it because I'm not an architect, but they have these ARCH. They have this kind of lettering. You know, it's slightly wider than it is tall. It's the bowl of the R sometimes is fat, sometimes it's like this. I mean, there's a design to them that is interesting and fun, and I had to address a bunch of envelopes that had a big broad line that was unvaried, and I saw this pen at a pen show, and it had a big, 1.5-pound ball of iridium on the end of this, and I thought, well, okay, this will be the perfect pen because it doesn't have variation of line, and it's a big round ball. I mean, you can see how round it is. I can see with my poor eyes. It's just this ice cream scoop ball of iridium glommed onto the end of this nib. And even Euclid would say this isn't a point, this is a sphere, because it's too big. So it's this big sphere of iridium that makes a big fat line, and 9 times out of 10 I hate this pen, but every once in a while I have to do a job that requires that kind of lettering or that kind of line work to it. I also have 2 or 3, not very many, factory made stub nibs on a 51, and these are relatively rare and they're sort of fun, but Euclid probably would hate this because it doesn't make that sort of line that Euclid wants. It makes 2 different kinds of lines. It makes a fat line and a thin line based on direction that you are drawing the pen. And it's nice and it's fine for this kind of lettering, Gothic and Chancery and all that kind of stuff. I would prefer to use a pen with a regular nib on it rather than a 51, and partly because I can see the nib easier on a regular fountain pen. One of the things with 51s, if 51s have a flaw, it might be that it's easier for you to rotate the pen and to end up writing on the end of it in a way that cannot make a line because the slit between the 2 halves of the iridium is not in contact with the paper. And it's kind of easy to rotate this pen absent-mindedly and end up with that problem because the pen doesn't have a lever to remind you which way is up, and you can put the cap on the pen where the top of the clip lines up with the top of the nib, and that can help you. But this is missing its little thing. I could feel that with my little finger. It's missing. I have to find a different cap. Or anyway, so that's kind of a flaw with it because of its symmetry. But let me show you now. Let me talk about the kind of pen nib that I like on these pens. Often. I like and have use for other kinds of nibs. And this is not, I don't require this kind of nib, but this is one that I particularly like. And it's one that has a little tiny bit of flex based on pressure. And it also has a huge difference between the writing right side up and writing upside down. And it's almost like having two pens in one. And it's kind of fun. And here, rotating it 180 degrees is what I do with these pens. And maybe the symmetry of it helps me do that. See, I'm just contradicting myself. You can't, none of you can trust anything I say. I'm just telling you that right now because, as I've often reported to you, I can change my mind in the middle of a sentence. Gee, I really love that pen. You know, this one, I've just dipped these so they're skipping because I just dipped them. I haven't filled them. But this one has this sort of loud-ish, not very flexible line on the top side, but you flip it over and it has an excruciatingly fine line. So the difference between the top and the bottom in this particular case is great. And I love when that happens on a 51. Let's see what this one does. I think the ones that I kept on my desk are the ones that have that characteristic. Yeah, another really nice one that has a really, really fine underside and a slightly flexible upper. This is a 51 Special. This has a steel nib rather than a gold one, and it too has a nice difference between the top and the bottom, and also a little bit of flex. But because it's a 51 Special and not a gold nib, the nib eventually might wear down faster if I start computing pi 3.14159, when I get to half of infinity, it might wear out. But because it isn't the gold nib. But it's still pretty sweet. 51s generally don't need the gold for flexibility's sake, but it still is a metal that doesn't corrode with ink and things like that. So maybe these nibs don't either. I don't know what they're made of. This non-gold stuff. Is it non-corrosive ink? So anyway, there you have it. Look at these. Well, two of these grays are the modern aerometric gray, and two are the vacuumatic gray, so that's why the colors are different. But and yes, I know this is not the right cap for this pen. I know that. You don't have to. I know you're writing it right now saying, how dare you put the wrong cap on that pen. You don't have to write that. I know that. This has a name engraved on the back of it, really faintly though, and I can't even. Oh, this is the right side up. Looks like an R. Richard Williams. It's not enough. Yeah, Richard Williams. Richard? Richard Williams. Engraved with the least amount of pressure. It's just a whisper of a name. Anyway, there you go. 51s. The 51s that I like. I know that a lot of you are going to say, I want to buy that one. Well, you can just say that. You can type that all you want, but it's not going to be sold to you because I might get a job tomorrow where I have to make this kind of a line. And if you have the pen, I won't be able to do it. Will I? The one that's missing its little top. I should probably put the correct cap on this. This is an aerometric style cap. One of the things I don't like, I remember this pen now, that it tended to skip a lot, and I ended up just dipping the pen to do the envelopes. So there's something that needs to be adjusted to it to make it flow better. But again, a pen that has a big blob of iridium on it, if you rotate it just even slightly, it's going to not make contact with the paper. So you really do have to hold it exactly correctly to make it work. And so it's not as easy to write with as it would be if it was a smaller nib. Okay, now I'm done.